Okay, hello there everyone, and welcome to today's District Administration web seminar. It's great to have you all with us here today. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Kurt Eisler-Durley. I'm the web seminar editor for DA, and I'll be your moderator. The title of our event, as you see here, is Creating Project-Based Learning Environments Through Makerspaces, and it is being brought to you through the generous support of our sponsor for today, Acer and Microsoft Windows Pro. First, as people are coming in here today, I'll start with a bit of background about our topic. In Ventura USD in California, one low-achieving middle school at risk of closure was instead transformed into the Anza Academy of Technology and the Arts, or DATA, a high-achieving magnet school. A significant component in DATA's dramatic turnaround has been its innovative project-based and collaborative learning environments and makerspaces, which also employ technology as a central component. Today we'll be learning more about how the leadership of DATA is utilizing technology in innovative ways to create project-based learning environments, as well as some strategies for doing the same in any school or district. We're looking forward to a very interesting presentation and discussion here, plus live Q&A. We look forward to your questions. So do stay tuned. We're going to get started in just a minute or two here. Before we do, though, just some quick housekeeping. If you're having any trouble listening through your computer speakers right now, or if you need audio access over the phone at any time, you may have noticed we posted the phone number and access code in the chat panel that you should see at the middle right margin of your screen. There on the right side of your screen, you can use those numbers to get audio access over the phone if you need it at any time. Speaking of that chat panel, you can also use that if you need any tech support. Just send a message to our host and producer. His name is Joseph Morrow. In that drop-down menu there, just send him a message if you need any other help. If you have a question for our speaker today, please feel free to use the Q&A panel that you should see at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Just make sure it's set to all panelists, like it says on the slide here. We'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation here today. So again, if you have a question, please feel free to fire away at any time. Just type it in that Q&A box at the bottom right-hand corner there. Also, a common question we get is about the slides and the archive recording. And yes, everyone who registered as well as attended today will be getting access to the slides if you want to go back over the presentation. And we are recording here, and this will be archived on the DA site, and you'll get additional information after our seminar here about how you can access that. So I'll tell you more about that a little bit later on. Okay, so with that, on to our program. Today we're very fortunate to have with us Alex Wulff. He's middle school STEM instructor at the Anza Academy of Technology and the Arts, or DATA, in the Ventura USD in California. So with that, Alex, I'll turn it over to you at this point. It's great to have you with us here today. Welcome to our web seminar.
Thanks so much for having me. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes, you sound good, Alex. Thanks.
All right, terrific. So first of all, I feel decidedly underdressed in my headshot, but this is Southern California. So let me give you a little bit of background. I started teaching 20 years ago, and I started out in South Central Los Angeles and teaching 4th grade. And I figured out after about 2 weeks that delivering content through a kind of a traditional textbook workbook model wasn't going to work very well for me. So I was fortunate to be in graduate school at a Pepperdine satellite there, and got together with some professors, and they helped me to start developing project-based curriculum about 20 years ago. And then that was compounded by the fact that Pepperdine at that point in time was closing down their computer lab, or updating it, and that allowed me at that point in time to take, I believe, 25 of their computers from their lab and bring it to my classroom in LA. And basically have one-to-one project-based in South Central Los Angeles 20 years ago, and it was a great start. A lot of big challenges, a lot of failures, but it definitely kind of set the stage for how I wanted to teach and for, I guess, my belief system and what's the most effective way to reach kids through technology and through highly engaging curriculum. So after teaching in South Central, I moved up to Ventura and bought most of those computers with me, taught 4th and 5th grade at a Title I school, somewhat rural out here, called Statacoy Elementary School. Got to try kindergarten there, got to try 1st grade, but spent most of my time doing 4 or 5 combos and looping and continued teaching project-based. And then got hired by the district offices to do innovative curriculum and design. And I was not very happy down there, and because I felt like I needed that student contact. And luckily, at that point, Data Middle School was, Data Middle School had just received an MSAP grant. The intention of this grant, it was a magnet schools grant, and the intention was to diversify. So Data at that point was called Anza. It was down to about 450 students. It was 100% poverty, had the highest EL population in our district, and based on No Child Left Behind, was failing pretty horribly, and it looked as though the school was going to be shut down. And then our district did something pretty incredible, which was instead of shutting the school down and busing kids to high-achieving schools, they elected to put in place a one-to-one technology initiative, bring in innovative instruction project-based, and provide transportation to families who wanted to go to Anza, huge PR push behind that as well. And as a result, in the past 6 years, we've gone from roughly 400 students, 100% poverty, to close to 1,000 students with a waiting list. And we still have obvious challenges. We have the way the magnet was structured was that students who live within the boundary gain automatic admission. And we did this, or the district did this, to try and have an equitable access to this technology magnet. I think the assumption was that if we made it a pure magnet school, that the most informed families, which are typically going to be middle-class families, et cetera, were going to be the ones who were going to dive in here. We had a similar experience at one of our high-achieving high schools here, and so the district elected to structure it differently in that if you live within the boundary, you automatically gain access, and then the remaining spots become open to lottery base. So basically 30% of our students come from outside of the boundary right now, and those students are primarily from middle-class families and upper-middle-class families. And so the reason I think that's important, it's important for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that it creates a really large dilemma for us, which is how do we meet the needs of these super high-achieving students who are busing in? How do we meet the needs of our sort of unidentified high achievers who are in the neighborhood? And then how do we also meet the needs of kids who are struggling due to poverty, due to English language challenges, et cetera? And so for me, I've reached the conclusion that one-to-one initiative and the ability to create sort of custom learning experiences for each of these subgroups is a huge advantage. So if I look here, I put this chart up here, and on the left-hand side, what you have is that is a group of kids who won a nationwide wind turbine championship. As a result of winning that championship, they were invited to present in Las Vegas, Nevada at the American Wind Educators Association, Wind Engineers Association. While they were there, they took some of their entrepreneurial knowledge that we teach in the STEM classroom. We have an entrepreneurial program, which I'll go more in detail with later. They actually pitched the CTO of Siemens, just did a cold pitch, walked up to him, and as a result, he invited them all to go to Florida, spending, I think, $10,000 of his own money, and tours of Siemens, and then that has led to all sorts of other opportunities for these kids as far as contacts with Siemens, which they've then leveraged into winning local competitions for entrepreneurialism, et cetera. Sorry, still a victim to the bells here. So at the same time, though, if you look at the data on the right there, that's just a chart showing California achievement. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this. And one of the things that strikes me about it is, data's numbers are even more polarized because we still have the highest EL population and we have the highest poverty population in Ventura Unified. But if you look even at, California as a whole, I think what you see is that, the two biggest subgroups of learners are either scoring a 1 or a 2 on the SBAC for mathematics. And then we're pretty much equally divided between kids who are, considered at grade level in mathematics and kids who are above grade level in mathematics. I know a lot of people like to group those kids together, but I don't think that's really an accurate grouping. I think that each of those groups is unique and different. And I think that trying to approach all these students' needs through traditional curriculum only, delivering, workbook, textbook lessons designed for what's really the smallest subgroup, if you look there, it's probably not going to be the most effective way. And so having one-to-one at Anza or at Data has provided us as a school with some pretty amazing tools for meeting all those different kids' needs. And again, I'll get specifically into that a little bit later on. So I get the privilege of teaching in 3 different classrooms here. We have a STEM classroom, which is a giant makerspace full of all kinds of goodies like CNC routers and 3D printers and laser engravers and drones that kids build and program and fly. And we have further closets full of ROVs and every kind of fun thing that you can imagine. And then I also get the privilege of teaching math and science project-based. And because of the fact that the Anza or Data is on a block schedule, which is, I think, another really important aspect to integrating technology and to integrating project-based, I get to see these kids, my 6th graders, math science, for 100 minutes every single day. So that means that we have these huge, meaningful chunks of time in which we can implement PBL at a really deep level. It means that we can very quickly get kids up to speed with technology proficiencies, how to access and communicate through blogs, how to access all kinds of open source CAD and CAM programs, et cetera. I think this is really difficult to do if you're restricted to 45-minute periods. I'm sure there are people who are doing it successfully, but again, I would just point out that switching to the block schedule has been a huge asset for us here at the Anza, and also obviously having the one-to-one has been instrumental in allowing us to innovate through project-based. So in the 6th grade math science classroom, the way this looks is that the year is broken down into 4 PBLs. This year there's actually going to be a 5th one. And these 4 PBLs are designed so that they meaningfully integrate all of the 6th grade NGSS and Common Core math standards. And the cool thing about PBL is that you're not limited at the end. It's not like there's a math textbook that you're working on, and when you get to a certain point where you've learned about ratios, you get to the end of that chapter, there's nowhere else to go. When you have PBL enhanced through technology, there's really no limit. Really no limit to how far you can take it, and I'll give you guys some specifics on that also later on. But the 4 large projects that we do, we start the year by engineering wind turbines, and students engineer them from the ground up. And within that wind turbine project, as students are designing blades, they are learning how to calculate area of irregular polygons by breaking them down into rectangles and triangles, and then they're using the scientific process to measure the impact of a blade's area on the turbine performance. They are engineering their own gearboxes, and they are 3D printing and CNC routing those. So in addition to learning what we call the standard 6th grade skills, they're learning CAD and CAM processes. So when they're making their gearboxes, they have a choice of whether they want to cut those on a laser, use a CNC router, make them out of like a ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, or maybe hop onto a 3D printer and go ahead and print those gears out of ABS or PLA. Basically, the students are given lots of different choices. They're given lots of opportunities to fail early on and to hopefully learn from those failures. But there's a constant eye on specific standards and specific outcomes that we're looking for as we do this. So there's kind of a workflow that happens here, which is that when we first introduce a PBL, like wind turbines, for example, I begin by telling the kids, like, okay, or asking them actually, what math do you think you're going to need to know in order to do this? And as the kids, start shouting out the different skills that they'll need, like calculating area, knowing how to calculate ratios, knowing how to measure angles, etc. One of the things to me that is great about technology, again, is I go, well, how many of you guys already know how to do this? So let's say area is the topic. And typically what happens is the entire class raises their hands and they sort of have a very arrogant look on their faces and they say, yeah, we already know how to do this. And I say, great. May I deliver a quick pretest to you, just 3 questions on area, and if we get a class average of 90% or above, then we can just move straight into the engineering, because that's really what most of the kids want to do. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. I deliver that pretest, and this is an interesting thing. A lot of people are skipping this pretest part, and they say, well, I already know the kids don't know it. My feeling is what you know is not really as important as what they know. They think they already know it, which means they're not ready to learn. However, if you deliver this pretest and the result comes back 40% class average, and by the way, when I say deliver the pretest with one-to-one, I think there's a variety of mechanisms for doing this, but we use Illuminate, and Illuminate has a item bank of questions through a company called Amplify. I think they might have changed their name to Fluence now. But basically, I think several thousand Common Core math questions. Some are open response, some are multiple choice, multiple correct, etc. But a teacher can easily go in and in less than 10 minutes construct a quick measure to ascertain whether or not kids are already proficient at a skill or not. So anyway, we deliver that measure, and then the favorite part is we then share the results with the whole class. We put it up on the board, not individual students, we never shame anybody, but we put it up by question and overall. And when the kids look up there and they go, oh my gosh, 40%. And you go, yeah, what else do you notice is going on with this data? And then the kids start analyzing data right away, and they're looking at it and they're going, hey, well, we actually had a 90% class average on question number 1, but on question 2 and 3, we were in the 20s. And you sit there and you, okay, so what else do you notice? Hey, on question 2, almost everybody who got it wrong for the same reason. So the kids are now doing their own data analysis from a pretest perspective. We go back, we look at the questions, and then I simply ask, would you guys like me to teach you how to do this so that you can build a better wind turbine? They say, yes. And now, if I wanted to, I could deliver content through a traditional method like a workbook textbook. But the difference is there's now meaning and an identified need for the students. Or I can go straight to some activity that requires them to utilize and apply the skill, like maybe drawing blades to scale on graph paper, then cutting them out, measuring the area. And I can reinforce those skills with free things like Khan Academy, where I can just, as a teacher, not just turn kids loose on it, but assign these specific skills and give them a place that they can practice at home, work at their own pace, view videos and tutorials, etc. And to me, this is an infinitely more powerful way of teaching than just kind of saying, well, today's Tuesday, so we're on page 4. especially if you go back and look that, you might be on page 4, but you're using a 6th grade curriculum, and somewhere between, 50 and 60% of the kids that are in the state of California are probably performing math at lower or significantly lower than a 6th grade level. Again, with one-to-one, you have incredible flexibility, not only to pinpoint where these kids are, but also to customize your curriculum to meet their needs. There's no reason why you can't hop from 6th grade questions down to 5th if you need to, or go from 5th grade or 6th grade up to 7th or 8th. And an interesting thing about this is that for the past 2 years, 10 to 20% of my students I have class sizes typically running between 35 and 40 students, so 35 and 40 to 1. And I still get 10 to 20% of my students who can accomplish 2 years of math in 1 year through this mechanism without it being an incredible workload on me, because I'm just able to sort of facilitate through the technology. They just skip straight into 8th grade math. And as a result of that, our district has actually had to create a pathway where our 7th graders, after they finish 8th grade math, go straight into the high school, and they start off at Math 1 honors in the high school, and then when they're actually in 9th grade and they transfer into the high school, they are already Math 2 honors students. And we're able to do this because of the one-to-one in a regular classroom environment. We can really customize really high ceilings, really low floors, meet the needs of all those different kids. And at data, that's probably our primary challenge. Okay, now for science instruction, the technology, again, you have to remember that the PBLs are weaving the science and the math together. So, it's been my experience that most of the kids who come into 6th grade have not actually had really many opportunities to be scientists or to conduct a lot of independent research. Most of the kids coming into 6th grade have had what we would call the language arts of science. So they've read about science, they've learned vocabulary about science, they've maybe drawn some pictures about science, etc. But as far as actually having the opportunity to be scientists and to be engineers, it's hit and miss. But when I ask the students, and also when I recall my experience at elementary school, there's maybe 1 or 2 experiences in a year where kids are actually conducting an experiment on their own. And of those 1 or 2 experiences, typically the kids know the outcome before they get started. So for example, if you're going to mix, baking soda and vinegar, you already know what's going to happen. You understand it's a chemical reaction. And beyond the whiz-bang effect, there's not a lot of substance there. Whereas if you're actually using science to build a faster solar race car, to build a more powerful wind turbine, to engineer an aquaponics setup that ideally balances abiotic and biotic ecosystem components so that your fish and plants can thrive, that's a totally different experience. And so then the question comes, all right, so I'll jump to aquaponics because it's one of the favorite things. All the kids work in teams of 5, and they engineer their own aquaponics setups, including bell siphons. In case you don't know, aquaponics is basically the hybrid between aquaculture, raising of fish, or basically any kind of aquatic animals for food, and hydroponics, which is raising plants through water, only using or without soil, let's say. So kids engineer their own setups here, their own aquaponics setups, and as they're doing this, there is no textbook, and there certainly isn't a textbook that's going to align to 6th grade NGSS. But if we look at the standards of comparing biotic and abiotic ecosystem components, if we look at the standards of looking at Earth cycles, if we look at the standards of looking at bacteria, plant, and animal cell characteristics and differences, and then we go out onto the World Wide Web and we can deliver content to the students through the prism of giving them amazing simulations, videos, opportunities to interact with one another through blogs like Edmodo or through Google Classroom. And you get kids who are engineering aquaponic setups, monitoring for the nitrogen cycle, performing real experiments that they don't know the outcome, they don't know how it's going to end, performing these real experiments, trying to balance an ecosystem, incredibly challenging stuff. Sixth graders rise to the task, and by the end, everyone has made incredible progress. Some people have a lot of dead fish. There are some dead plants, but that is appropriate. It's not that everyone has to succeed. It's that everybody has to learn to make progress, and everybody has to be a scientist, and everybody has to have an opportunity to engineer something and fail. And again, without one-to-one, it's incredibly challenging to deliver meaningful content, to deliver content that's aligned to what the students need. And yeah, I mean, that's I guess the long and short of it. If somebody knows how to do it through a textbook, I'd love to hear it. And the other thing that's kind of amazing about this is, you know, we talked about having kids skip a grade level in math. Well, in science, a lot of these guys are going into University of Hawaii distance learning websites and Purdue University distance learning websites, again, in 6th grade. And they are learning about aquaponics at a university level. With our wind turbine program, we actually look at Tufts University engineering students' data, and we analyze their data, and then we try and build a turbine that's more powerful than theirs. And every year, the 6th graders do. So again, there's just no limit to what can be accomplished with one-to-one in the classroom and a creative approach to instruction. Now the STEM classroom, or it's now called the Makerspace, was born from this dilemma that after 6th grade, kids were leaving the 6th grade classroom and they had a really solid foundation, not only in math and science, but also in CAD, CAM, 3D printing, CNC routing, laser engraving. And after they left 6th grade, it was over. It was just, well, where do we go? So they still have PBL throughout the school, but no opportunities to apply it through that prism. And so we had an amazing assistant principal at the time. His name was Chris Pruitt. And Chris Pruitt approached me and said, hey, what do you think about like starting just a STEM classroom that really focuses on these skills? And you know, I felt like a kid in a candy shop. He absolutely laid that foundation out for me, and I said, yeah, let's do this. And that program, which started, I think, in the 2nd year of the magnet, so I think this is our 5th year of that program. So in that classroom, we are now up to a dozen 3D printers, half a dozen CNC routers, laser engraver, some really cool woodworking tools, I think 20 programmable drones that are put together with all kinds of 3D printed and CNC routed parts, etc. And in that classroom, we're able to weave music in. We're engineering laser harps. We've had great support from our local tech distributor. His name is Indy Batra, MJP Computers. He has been absolutely incredible supporter of the classroom. So through him and through Ventura Rotary Club, kids have built their own electric guitars, and then they're being provided with music lessons on how to play those guitars after they make them. Again, stuff that you would not think would be happening in a 7th or an 8th grade classroom, but I feel like this new way of learning, it kind of flips things upside down a little bit, in that the things that we think are going to be really hard for the kids oftentimes aren't at all. In fact, they're much more challenging for us as adults, teachers. The kids have a sort of a no limits approach. They're not afraid of the machines. They're not afraid of, I guess, failing or breaking something. And so I would add that another great tool in this makerspace that's been sort of indispensable has been just the fact that we can do screen captures. So I can take these technical aspects of how to use a 3D printer, how to use a CNC router, et cetera, and I can just record my lessons. I can take all of those recorded lessons for each of the machines, categorize them, and upload them to either an Edmodo or a Google Classroom, and then the students have access to all of my lessons that are like specifically tailored to each of the machines. Another nice thing about that Makerspace, everything is open source. So any kid who leaves here, regardless of their socioeconomic status, when you leave, you can buy your netbook for $1. Excuse me, your laptop for $1. So if a kid leaves here, buys that laptop for $1, we can load that laptop full of every single open source app that we use, or every app that's available for students. So we can put Fusion 360, we can put SketchUp, we can put Repetier Host, which is how we operate our 3D printers. We can put Inkscape, which is what gets our things ready for our laser and also for our CNC routers. We can have kids on easel. So when kids leave here in 8th grade, they have this device that they're taking with them, which is now fully loaded and allowing them to continue with all of the learning that they experience here in our Makerspace. So keeping an eye on time here. Forgive me if I get a little overexcited. Okay, so that would bring me to one other aspect, which is my undergraduate experience was as a liberal arts major, Hobart and William Smith College. And I double majored in German and rhetoric with a minor in religious studies, which probably makes you wonder how on earth is this guy qualified to teach 3D printing, CNC routing, get kids ready for wind turbines. And so one thing that I would say is that the one-to-one technology, or the access to technology, it's not just important for the kids, it's important for the teachers, because we live in an era where if you want to learn how to do something, if you're motivated and excited and you have, access to the right equipment and you have proper support from your administrators, you can teach yourself just about anything. And so, I think I told you earlier that we had a national championship wind turbine team. When I say national championship, they competed against over 5,000 schools from across the United States and Canada. And they flew to Washington, D.C. and competed there at, I forget the exact name, but one of the huge science festivals, and they won. We also teach in that makerspace, there's a heavy emphasis on entrepreneurialism. And so we compete every year for the past 5 years. There's a countywide Aspire 3 entrepreneurialism program, which is an amazing program put together by a name called put together by a guy named Sean Bodwaj. And this program teaches middle, high school, and university students entrepreneurialism. And so we started off having this competition where our 6th and 7th and 8th graders would compete against the local high schools and colleges. In the first year, our middle schoolers won. They beat the college students and the high school students. And people thought, oh, how cute, what an interesting anomaly. That's very funny. They did it the next year, and the students from the STEM classroom took first place and they took second place. And this is against Ventura College. This is against CSU Channel Islands. This is against all of our local high schools, including Moore Park and TO. And the next year, they won again. And then they had to start changing the categories for these kids because, again, if you give them not only the ability to go ahead and dream up their own inventions, then you allow them to actually prototype those inventions, and then you deliver expertise through the web. You can take a guy like me who is, a liberal arts background with a multiple subject teaching credential, and I can facilitate students achieving things at, the highest levels imaginable. Talked a little bit about some of these opportunities that the kids have received through being in the classroom. And then finally, the entrepreneurial aspect relates to me as well, because a lot of you guys, I assume, since it's District Admin Magazine or admins, you're probably wondering, well, how are we going to pay for all of this? So one of the things that I'm really proud of is that Data Middle School has not had to pay a single penny for any of the machines or any of the equipment that's in that classroom. We're very lucky here that we have an organization called the Ventura Education Partnership. They give $1,000 mini grants. That's how I got my first 3D printer, I think 6 years ago now. And then the community has become very excited. We're constantly pitching, constantly reaching out to local members of the community. I alluded earlier to MJP Computers. MJP Computers then put me in touch with Acer Computers. Acer Computers made an incredible gift to the classroom of 32 laptops, and they're touchscreen, interactive, so the kids are able to just interface with those seamlessly and produce beautiful, again, works of art on the CNC routers and 3D printers and lasers, and also to use those things because they have full functioning keyboards as just traditional laptops for writing reports, putting together experiments, etc. And then as word is spread, we get support from Gene Haas Foundation, Rotary Club of Ventura, and now I think for the first time we're actually in a position, there's a new grant out there that we have access to, where we're getting $10,000 sums, like larger sums of money, because we're moving to kind of a push through CTE, Career Tech Education. I just went out and got my CTE credential, got some NIMS certifications, which is metalworking certifications. Anything to try and access more funding and try and access more equipment and more opportunities for students in the classroom. But again, bringing it back to the fact that, the teacher needs to be an entrepreneur as well. And the teacher needs to be a scientist, and the teacher needs to be an inventor, and the teacher needs to be an engineer. And with one-to-one and with proper support from administration, you're going to find that you probably already have that you've got people on your staff who are going to jump up and do that.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Alex. Very interesting and of course, a very inspiring story there of your school. Thanks so much for telling us more about it. Now, to our audience, I'd like to extend the opportunity here to ask questions. Again, if you do have questions for Alex about his work there, everything that they're doing in the data school, feel free to enter in the Q&A box, bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Also, a couple reminders. We often get questions about accessing the slides and the archive recording, and yes, everyone will be getting follow-up information with links to where you can access those. If you want to go back over it, I know there's a lot of great information contained in there. So let's see, there was sort of a comment / question at one point for you there, Alex, saying there's a new way of learning for the teachers as well. Could you talk about everything that you outlined there? Is this just your classes, or you have other teachers there also incorporating PBL and all these things that you're using?
Thank you for asking. So we are incorporating PBL at all grade levels. People are doing it in different capacities. So, for example, we have some intervention reading classes, and clearly there's a very specialized need in those classes, but in those classes we have engineering Fridays where students are given meaningful opportunities to participate in really cool engineering projects every Friday so that they are still feeling like they're part of the school. One of the challenges that we have is that it's a really inspiring place to teach, but it's also a really difficult place to teach because of the huge disparity in abilities, income levels, etc. We get a fair amount of turnover with staff, but what's amazing is that when we get new teachers who come in here, and we had it happen this year, and we start talking about PBL, we don't typically have to force it on them. We have a reputation now as a school that this is a school where, first of all, technology proficiency is expected, and PBL is a part of what we do. And, I was thrilled that we had a professional development just a couple of days ago to get the entire 6th grade team onto engineering wind turbines. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go with a lot of new teachers, and it's really inspiring for me after having done this for a while how excited people were. We have one guy who's he's in his late 30s, and he's got his administrative credential. He came up to me afterwards, and he goes, I was going to interview to be an admin. He goes, and now I realize how much more I have to learn as a teacher. I'm staying for a while longer. And so I don't think that you're going to get everybody into it. I think you get a lot of people who maybe view teaching through a different prism. I've had people go, well, I'm not a curriculum writer, I'm a teacher. Okay. But there are enough people out there that if you want to meaningfully transform a school, I think that with administrative support like we have here, you can make that happen.
Sure, great. Thank you. Getting a lot of great comments from the audience in addition to questions. Thanks to everybody who's submitting both. Alex, a number of people here commenting, very impressive what you do. Thanks for everything that you shared. This is a great presentation. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Let's see, other questions. A couple questions here asking about other disciplines. Do you think there's application of project-based learning in, let's see, one person asked about art, another person asked about language arts. Alex, I know you said you had a liberal arts background. Do you have any thoughts on application outside of STEM even?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful for that question. First of all, I'll start with the aspect of including art. One of the things that a lot of places are doing, I think, when they implement a STEM program is they go STEM and they think right away about, a traditional robotics program, something along those lines. Great programs. I don't want to have anything negative to say about bringing a Beck's robotics program or a Lego program, but typically there's a pretty strong gender bias in that type of approach. It's hard for kids to fit that into their schema if it's not already a part of who they are. And so we, especially in the Makerspace, weave art and design heavily into everything that we do. So in that 6th grade class, when kids are designing their gearboxes, their gears become works of art. As they're sitting there in CAD and CNC, they're trying to create Rangoli-type designs within their gears that allow them to maintain dynamic stability and strength while still making it beautiful. And we have kids on the CNC routers who are taking original works of art, and then we can photograph and vectorize those artworks, and then we go ahead and just carve those into cast acrylic and other materials, build LED signs out of them. We have a new project that a student just stumbled upon. This is another great thing, by the way, is that the students often take the lead, where we discovered that if we took cast acrylic that was opaque and carved designs on the inside of that cast acrylic and made it into a box and then lit it, that when the light was off, you had a box that looked like an off-white cube, and as soon as you light it up, everything that you've done in relief on the inside lights up brighter. So kids are now just going crazy, obviously applying high-level, math concepts, getting all these tabs and components to fit, but also then integrating art, things that they're deeply passionate about into these boxes, these little secret designs that pop up. I'd be happy to share some pictures of that stuff if there's a mechanism for me to do that. But art heavily, and then for me, coming from an elementary school background, I'm greedy. I want to teach them everything. And so, even in my science classes, when we're writing reports, we're throwing hooks in there to make it exciting and interesting at the beginning. As I said before, when we're designing gear sets, we are using Rangoli and other forms of art to kind of create beautiful setups for the kids. It's basically fully integrated in everything that we do. And the challenge is just what the heart of the project is. That's sometimes the place that we run into a bit of a dilemma is some of the language arts teachers or social studies teachers might go, why does it have to be a science-based project? And the answer is it doesn't at all. I mean, we can 100% weave anything into these PBLs. Another example, I think, was with aquaponics, as we've talked about before. Well, in sixth grade, if you're teaching about, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and you're teaching about the Nile, and you're looking at agriculture practiced by ancient Egyptians and Aztecs, this is all aquaponics. This is a direct relationship. And as a matter of fact, you can actually study those ecosystems to pull out all of your biotic and abiotic ecosystem components that you want to try and biomimic in your aquaponics setups. So it takes some creativity, but absolutely we weave those in. And I would add that we have roughly a 50-50 gender distribution in the STEM classrooms. So we have, plus minus 5 students, but it's boys and girls are roughly equally distributed. And really the only downside to that classroom is that I have to run that one at 40-to-1 because it's popular and I don't want to tell kids no. And then there's a waiting list usually of 20 or 30 kids who can't get in. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay, great. Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. Let's see, there's a few questions here, similar questions asking about, you have any advice for elementary schools, or what do you think the focus should be for a makerspace or PBL at the elementary level? Again, Alex, you mentioned your background in elementary education. Do you have thoughts there in terms of the type of projects, or where somebody would start with maybe, I don't know, basic skills that you build on later, or you have any thoughts there?
Absolutely. So I think the most important thing that you just said was go ahead and get started, say where to start. So, I don't think it has to be 3D printing. I think it can be sewing. I think it can be any sort of part of the maker movement. Ideally, the teacher instructing the classroom has a passion for it and moves from there. But when I taught 4th and 5th grade, we actually were engineering wind turbines in 4th and 5th grade too, and there was a different emphasis maybe on what we were doing, but we were certainly able to weave skills into that. And as we discussed before, a lot of the things that we think are probably really intimidating for adults aren't necessarily intimidating for kids. So if I remember correctly, in 4th grade we were teaching conservation of energy, which tied in incredibly with looking at how you have wind energy being converted into, or a form of mechanical energy already being converted into electrical energy, and then we could use that electrical energy to, power a light, and we're going back to light and heat, and we could backwards map that all the way to the sun and uneven heating of the earth. And I remember in 4th and 5th grade we were also teaching about weather, so we're looking at wind and weather patterns. So it takes some creativity. I think the key is to start with something accessible and to not be afraid of kind of failing, because it's inevitable. One of the things that I often think about is that if you are delivering a box curriculum to the kids, in your first year you're struggling a little bit. In your second year, you've probably got it mastered if you're a veteran teacher. And 5 years down the road, you're not doing anything better than you were 5 years ago if you're just delivering that. Whereas if you go with PBL and you just have the courage to get started, you're going to struggle a lot in your first year or two, and you're going to have some real challenges. But the difference is that 5 years down the road, you're going to have established something really incredible for the kids. As far as equipment goes for makerspaces, I think one of the most overlooked pieces of equipment for kids, I love our CNC routers. So we go through this company called Inventables, and at the middle school level, we're building our own CNC routers called X-Carves, but they have another one called the Carvey. I know that one of the big constraints at an elementary school is, time to get things done, and then a second one is complexity. So a great thing about that Inventables company is, and I don't get paid by them, I don't even get free stuff, but they have a free app called Easel, which means that you can take their CNC routers, and the interface is so brilliantly simple. And kids can make incredible mosaics You can buy, for example, 2-color plastics. You machine off the top layer with an original work of student art, and that reveals a second color underneath. And you can tile an entire classroom out of it. It's the kind of stuff that parents, kids, the community, they see that, and they just go crazy for it. I like 3D printers, obviously, but to me, they're really complex to do right. I know everybody buys one because it's the trend, but what I've seen a lot happening around here is that people buy them and then they sort of download pre-made things and print them. And for me, like using a $1,500 or a $2,500 or a $3,000 device to make, 50-cent plastic parts, that's not it. If you're going to run a 3D printer, you need to have somebody who can really teach the kids. And by the way, at elementary school, you can do this. I've seen kids designing and 3D printing their own snowflakes, like 3-dimensional snowflakes, designing and 3D printing vases. But it's a more challenging tool, I think, to use than the CNC router. So I would definitely, if somebody's starting a makerspace, I would look at Inventables, I would look at the Carvey, I would look at Easel, and I think you'd be off to the races in no time.
Sure, great, interesting, thank you. Just a note to our audience, we are getting some questions in the chat window, but if you would go ahead and put them in the Q&A, that just puts it into a queue for us, makes it more organized. It's easier to kind of make sense of the questions coming in. We're getting a lot of great questions. So again, just if you put something in the chat window there, if you wouldn't mind just putting it in the Q&A instead, that would be helpful. Let's see, there's a couple questions also there, Alex, about English language learners. I think you mentioned there's a good population of ELL students there in your school. Was there, some people are asking about what sorts of resources did you use, or anything that you would recommend there when it comes to PBL and some of this kind of learning with those students in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think the place that we've seen the most success in that regard is in the makerspace or the STEM classroom. And so one of the things, I don't want to group everything together, but typically in our community, most of our EL learners are also low SES, and very often are also maybe performing at a 1 or a 2 in math and science, so below grade level. And so this definitely poses some dilemmas in the math science classroom, but in the makerspace, it's magical. Like, so the first 2 years that we ran that STEM classroom, that makerspace, kids would kind of stick their head in and they'd go, that's the classroom for the smart kids. I'm not going into there. And we then made a meaningful effort to go, first of all, you are one of the smart kids, and second of all, let's give it a try. And what happened really quickly is that you can take a kid who's 11 years old and at an 8th grade level in mathematics, and you can take a kid who's 11 years old and at a 2nd grade level in mathematics, but neither of them know how to solder. So you now introduce soldering in this STEM classroom, in this makerspace classroom. And for a lot of these kids, for the first time in their school careers, they're the best at something. And it's something new because we're starting on a level playing field. And that has now, so whether we're soldering, piloting drones, I don't care what your SBAC score was in language arts, and I don't care what your SBAC score was in math, it doesn't mean that you can fly a drone upside down and towards you where all the controls are reversed. So suddenly you'll see a kid who has an instinct for that. And again, he gets to be the hero. And a lot of, again, we talked earlier about the integration of art. A lot of our young women who are maybe struggling and men who are struggling with, in their math science classes, incredibly talented artists, now they're actually learning CNC and CAD because they're so excited to get to go ahead and produce their work. And I mean, I can tell you firsthand, I've got kids in that makerspace classroom and their report cards read F, 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 A+, F. And it's not only an exception, it's actually, happening quite often, because I feel like the projects that we do in that classroom give these kids, all kids, but especially kids, I mean, a kid knows when he's in an intervention class. And it definitely has an effect on a student. I came to this country as an English learner. It was quite a struggle for me. So to have a place where you can succeed at a level that is equal or above everyone around you, it's a pretty amazing thing. And we can do that through the Makerspaces and through those projects, because pretty much everybody's starting at ground zero when it comes to most of the things that we're doing in there.
Great, very interesting. Thank you. We just have a few minutes left here, but we'll try to hit a number of more questions if we can. Actually, you were just mentioning there some of the achievement, the impact on achievement. Someone asked there about that. You mentioned increased enrollment. What was the impact on student achievement, for example, on standardized tests? Do you get a sense of that sort of impact, Alex? Standardized test scores or other measures of achievement?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So school-wide, we still struggle. And I think that no matter how hard you're working at your school, poverty is a tough thing to beat. But one of the things that I'm very proud of is that if you disaggregate our students by subgroups, if you look at our GATE population, for example, the students that I'm teaching, we outperform the GATE population at all of our other middle schools, and we do it at a pretty significant level, and we do it consistently. If you look at our district delivers benchmarks, and I can tell you that our class average on those benchmarks is typically over 90%, with close to 100% mastery of all the skills, and we have several kids every year who are topping out the SBAC. So if you look at it as a whole school, definitely the numbers aren't there, and I would argue that, again, it's really hard for a school to solve poverty. But if you disaggregate each of our subgroups, including special ed, EL, and GATE, we're doing very well. And I would add that obviously when kids are leaving here at the end of 8th grade, a significant portion of the population is proficient not only in math, science, language arts, social studies, but also in CAD, entrepreneurialism, various other maker tools, et cetera, that I think are going to serve them very well. And by the way, we've also been able to create pathways through the high schools, through the CTE money that's coming, the Career Technical Education money coming from California. We're able to establish pathways so that learning process continues.
Okay, all right, sure. Great. Let's see. Another question asks, well, first says, I'm creating a makerspace on one side of our media center, but I'm contemplating whether to include all grade levels together or have separate areas for elementary, middle, and high school. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one way or the other. Alex, does that strike you? You have an opinion one way or the other, combining grade levels in a makerspace project area versus having it separated?
So I don't have a lot of experience at integrating with high school, middle school, and elementary. What I do notice, though, is that at each of those levels, there's going to be kids who it really resonates with, and they accomplish incredible things. I don't know that I could say that I'm qualified to specifically say whether one way or the other is better.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Fair enough. Thank you. Or just for clarification, you had mentioned a little bit earlier a couple companies you use, Inventables. Someone asked, what was the other one?
Let's see here. So Inventables is who we get our CNC routers from, and I think I just mentioned that one of the apps that we use through them is Easel. MJP Computers is the company that provides us with most of our laptops throughout the district and the area. If you're California region, Indy's pretty amazing guy, and that's helpful. I can make a list of sort of open source apps that we use, if that would be helpful, like Fusion 360 and SketchUp. These are great programs for design and CAD. Inkscape is a great program as well. I could be happy to put together a list. I'm happy to give out my email too if anybody has questions or anything else. I don't know if that's typically done through one of these, but I can do that to follow up with more specifics if people have questions.
Yeah, sure. That would be great. I think, Alex, you could actually put that in the chat window there to all participants. If you see where that is.
Yep.
And while Alex is doing that, just a couple more questions. We've reached the top of the hour here, but we still have a lot of folks in the event here. Thanks to everybody who's been submitting questions and comments. Thank you so much. Alex just shared his email address if you'd like to get in touch with him with any additional questions. And kind of on that note, someone asked, Alex, does your school host site visits if anyone wants to come see this in action? Have you done that? You think that would be all right?
Absolutely, yeah. Classroom's always open, school's always open. You can just call the front office here and people are happy to show you around. We're really proud of what we're doing here, so we have people coming through all the time.
Great. And a comment came in about that previous question about mixing grade levels. Someone just says, we have our younger students connect with the older students. We have a K-5 makerspace, and it's a winning situation for everybody. So there's one, at least one voice in support of combining grade levels. So there you go. All right, well, we've reached the top of the hour here. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time and wrap things up here. So on behalf of district administration, of course, I'd like to thank our speaker for today, Alex Wulff. Thanks so much for being with us and sharing your great story. And thank you again to our sponsor, Acer and Microsoft, for sponsoring our seminar here today. And to everyone in our audience, thank you as well for joining us. I do hope you found our presentation informative and useful to you here. Producing seminars like this is just part of our mission at DA to inform school district leaders like you about the latest news and trends in K-12 management. You'll find more coverage about issues such as the ones we discussed here in the pages of our monthly print magazine, as well as on our website and in our free daily e-newsletter, DA Daily, which you can sign up for there. And as I mentioned before, and we got a few questions here asking about this, for those of you who'd like to share this event with your colleagues, or if you want to go back over it at your own pace, you can access it from our website by going to the URL on your screen here, where it'll be posted in the archive section within about 48 hours. And if you'd like to download the slides, the PowerPoint from today, you'll also find instructions and a link in a thank you email that you'll receive later on today. So keep an eye out for that. You'll see a link in there that'll take you to where you can access those slides. Okay, so that's it for today's event. Once again, I'm Kurt Isley-Durley for District Administration. On behalf of my producer, Joe Morrow, and everyone on our production team, goodbye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us.